He smiled while my life shattered. The courtroom was silent except for Adrian's voice. Smooth, confident, rehearsed. Your Honor, this woman forged financial records to defraud my firm. His tone was silk, his words were poison. I stood there trembling, clutching the railing as flashes went off. Reporters, microphones, the machinery of public judgment grinding toward my destruction. His wife, the liar. His sixth. He didn't even look at me when the judge ordered the investigation. I saw the faint smirk tug at his mouth, that tiny twitch he used when he knew he'd won. My knees wobbled, and the air felt thick, like it was wrapping around my throat, suffocating me in slow motion. Someone gasped when he handed over the evidence. Fake documents he'd planted with surgical precision. I felt my world slide out from under me, leaving nothing but free fall. I remember thinking, he's doing it again. I'm next. But I didn't know yet that I would also be his last. My name is Regina Ward, and I used to believe love could heal people. I thought Adrian's kindness was real, the laughter over wine, the handwritten notes on my desk reading, "Thinking of you," the soft, "You're safe now," he whispered the night he proposed on the rooftop of his penthouse. The city sprawled beneath us like a kingdom he'd conquered. He was a brilliant defense attorney, magnetic, admired, dangerous in the way powerful men are. Women adored him. Men respected him. I was just the quiet editor at Meridian Publishing House, flattered beyond reason that someone like him even noticed me. At 32, after years of ordinary relationships and quiet disappointments, I felt chosen. He made me feel seen, until he didn't. The first time he snapped was over a text I hadn't replied to fast enough. I was in a meeting, my phone was silent. But that didn't matter. His eyes turned cold, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Don't make me feel invisible in my own home. We were at dinner, in public, and he'd said it low enough that only I could hear. The other couples laughed at something on the wine list. I laughed too, frozen. Something inside me shifted, just slightly like a crack in glass, barely visible, but it was there. Looking back now, that was the beginning of the end. He knew how to apologize, like an actor trained for empathy. He'd mastered it. "I just get scared you'll leave," he'd say, eyes glistening with practiced tears. "Everyone leaves when they see who I really am." I wanted to be the one who stayed. I wanted to be different, special, the woman who healed him. The next week, he bought me a diamond bracelet, 3 carats, tastefully set in white gold. Said it was to remind me that I was his constant, his word, his possession. But when I wore it to a dinner party at his firm, he whispered in my ear during cocktails, his hand on the small of my back, "Don't draw attention to yourself. People already talk enough about me marrying down." That night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror for so long my eyes went soft focus. The woman staring back looked confused, apologetic, smaller. I was apologizing to myself for being noticed. He had a way of shrinking me without ever raising his voice. It was an art form he'd perfected across 5 marriages. Adrian loved power disguised as affection. He'd brush my cheek in public, the picture of devotion, then correct me under his breath. "Smile smaller. Sit straighter. Don't mention your work. It's not interesting to these people." At home, he'd pour wine, make dinner with the precision of a man performing a role, and tell me about his ex-wives. "They were all ungrateful," he'd say, like a confession whispered to a priest. "I gave them everything and they ruined me, destroyed me, their jealousy, their instability." I should have run when he said that. Instead, I pitied him. I believed him. One night, he came home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. Heavy, floral, expensive. My stomach dropped. When I asked, his expression changed. Calm. Terrifying calm. The kind of calm that precedes a storm. "Regina, don't start. You know how anxious you get. You make up stories in your head. It's one of your problems." He made me doubt my own eyes, my own nose, my own sanity. Within minutes, I was apologizing for asking. By our 2nd anniversary, I lived in a world of small silences and careful steps. I learned what his moods sounded like before he spoke, the click of his cufflinks as he removed them, the pace of his breath when he walked through the door, the way his jaw tightened when he was about to correct me. He'd isolate me subtly, like he was simply protecting our bubble. "Your friends don't really get us," he'd say during quiet moments. "They envy what we have. They want to ruin it." Soon my calls went unanswered. My invitations stopped coming. My best friend Sarah sent one last text. "I'm worried about you. Please call me." I never did. Then the misunderstandings began. Credit card charges I didn't make. Emails sent from my account that I didn't write. He'd shake his head in mock concern, his voice soft and pitying. "You're forgetting things again, love. It's stress. You're overwhelmed." I started journaling to keep myself sane, filling notebook after notebook with dates and incidents, trying to build a record of reality. But one day, he found my latest notebook on the nightstand. He read it aloud, laughing. That particular laugh that made my skin crawl. "So now I'm the villain in your little diary? That's interesting. That's really interesting, Regina." His laughter still echoes in my bones. He began planting seeds long before the storm. First, he charmed my coworkers, sending flowers to my office on random Wednesdays, sponsoring my company's charity gala, personally greeting my boss at events. Everyone adored him. "You're so lucky," they'd tell me. "He's perfect. How did you land him?" I'd smile and say nothing. Then came the night he framed me as unstable. We were hosting friends, colleagues of his, important people. He spilled red wine across our Persian rug, deliberately. I was certain, though he claimed it was an accident. Later, after they left, he told them I overreacted and had one of my episodes. They'd laughed awkwardly. I stood frozen, humiliated in my own home. When the last guest left, he gripped my wrist hard enough to bruise and whispered, "If you ever embarrass me again, you'll regret it." The bruise bloomed purple and yellow over the next 3 days. I wore long sleeves to work. That was the night I realized he didn't love me. He owned me. And owners don't let their possessions leave quietly. Adrian's charm was a weapon, and by now he'd polished it to perfection. He started showing up to my office unannounced. Always with a bouquet, a kiss on my cheek too close to my mouth, a compliment too loud for others to miss. "Just checking on my favorite editor," he'd beam to my coworkers who'd melt into smiles. They saw devotion. I saw surveillance. Once, I caught him at my desk, my laptop open to my emails. "You left it unlocked," he said smoothly, closing the screen. "I was just shutting it down before someone else saw your passwords." His tone was calm, almost bored, but his gray eyes, those calculating, predatory gray eyes, were measuring what I'd seen. From that day, little things began to vanish. My appointment reminders deleted. My saved drafts of manuscripts erased. My passwords mysteriously changed overnight. When I brought it up, he smiled that smile. "You've been so forgetful lately, love. Are you sleeping? Maybe you should see someone." He was rewriting reality one deleted file at a time, erasing evidence of my competence, my autonomy, my existence outside of him. And everyone else. They adored him. He was the hero husband with the gentle voice and the tragic past of difficult ex-wives. I was the fragile, lucky woman who'd rescued him from his pain. He built a story so perfect, even I started to believe it. One afternoon, I met his secretary, Lila. Young, polished, always nervous around him. She handed me his dry cleaning, wrapped in plastic, her eyes darting like a trapped bird. "He's in court all week," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You should get some rest. Take care of yourself." There was something in her tone, something brittle, something knowing. I almost asked what she meant. But Adrian's voice echoed in my head, his words worn into grooves in my brain. "You twist people's words when you're anxious, Regina. It's one of your problems." So I smiled, thanked her, and went home. That evening, Adrian came home smelling like cologne that wasn't his, something expensive and woodsy. He kissed my forehead and said, "I'm worried about you. You seem paranoid lately. Is everything okay? You can tell me." He always framed concern like kindness. Then he'd move the goalpost of my sanity another inch. That night, I dreamed of 6 faceless women, each holding a torn photograph of him, each mouthing the same word: run. I woke up shaking, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd become one of his ghosts. It started small, a whispered question in the elevator at work, a coworker's hesitant glance. Then came the HR meeting. "Regina," my manager began gently, "we've received reports about some irregularities, missing edits on major manuscripts, emails sent in your name that don't match your style." Adrian sat beside me, his hand resting protectively on mine, his thumb stroking my wrist. "She's been under so much pressure," he told them, his voice laced with concern. "I've been encouraging her to see someone, a therapist. Maybe some time off would help her get grounded again." They believed him. Of course they did. The office had seen him kiss my forehead. They'd heard his compliments. They didn't know about the bruises or the deleted files or the way he rewrote my reality every single day. When we got home, he poured wine and hummed softly while I stood in silence, my career crumbling like ash. "You wanted attention," he said without looking up. "Now you have it." He sipped his wine and added almost lazily, "You'll thank me one day. I'm teaching you humility." That night, I cried so quietly I thought I might dissolve into the sheets. One morning, he called me into the kitchen. "You didn't pay the electric bill," he said, holding up a notice with the authority of a prosecutor presenting evidence. "I did," I whispered. "I remember." "Stop," he cut in. "Just admit it. You're overwhelmed. You can't handle basic responsibilities." His tone was pity wrapped in control. He reached out to touch my cheek. I flinched. His fingers lingered in the air, suspended like a question mark. "You're making me the villain again," he murmured. "That's cruel, Regina. That's really cruel." He turned and left. An hour later, I found the bill, paid in full, confirmed in writing, time-stamped 3 days ago. Proof. Evidence. Truth. I printed it out with shaking hands. But when I tried to show him, he laughed. "You printed that yourself. You're doctoring evidence now. That's a new low." That night, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. My eyes were hollow, my skin pale from sleepless nights, my shoulders curved inward like I was trying to make myself invisible. And beneath my sleeve, a faint purple bruise, shaped like fingers, where his hand had gripped my wrist. He said it wasn't from him, and I almost believed him. Lila came to see me one rainy afternoon, appearing at my door like a ghost. She was drenched, trembling, her eyes darting over her shoulder. "I shouldn't be here," she said, "but I need you to know he's done this before." The room tilted. The floor seemed to shift beneath me. She told me about her friend, Adrian's 5th wife, Isabella, how she'd been found unstable, how she'd been committed to a psychiatric facility after a scandal Adrian helped her recover from, how the charges against her disappeared, just like her reputation, just like her voice. "He keeps trophies," Lila whispered, stepping inside, her voice urgent. "Photos, recordings, bank accounts in their names. He—" A loud knock interrupted us. Adrian's voice, smooth as glass, from the hallway. "Regina? Everything all right in there? I saw an umbrella in the hall." Lila froze, her entire body going rigid. I opened the door. He smiled at her like she was invisible, a ghost, a non-entity. "I'll take it from here," he said softly to me, and then he closed the door between them. I never saw Lila again. Her number was disconnected that night. Her social media disappeared. Within a week, she was gone from the office too. I learned what silence really costs. The day of the hearing, the air itself felt heavy with inevitability. Adrian's team surrounded him like an entourage, stylish, confident, blind to his predatory nature. He held my hand in the hallway, squeezing too tight, a warning disguised as affection. Just answer what's asked. Don't make this harder for yourself. The cameras flashed. His statement was flawless. Tears, genuine-looking tears, trembling at the right moments. The devastated husband, betrayed by his wife's instability and jealousy. Every word rehearsed, perfected. When it was my turn, I opened my mouth and nothing came out. My voice cracked like breaking ice. The judge frowned. The courtroom held its breath. And Adrian looked at me like a man watching a performance he'd already written the ending to. Afterward, he guided me outside for the waiting press, his hand firm on my back, a picture of devoted support. She's been through so much, he said to the microphones. I just hope she gets the help she needs. I'm worried about her mental state. Flash, flash, flash. My face on every screen. His words the headline. That night I tried to leave. I packed a small bag, just the essentials, and made my way down the stairs quietly, carefully, so he wouldn't hear. I'd almost made it to the landing when his hand clamped down on my arm. Where do you think you're going? His voice was quiet, that terrifying quiet. I tried to pull away. He dragged me backward up the stairs, his grip like iron. I fell hard on the third step. Pain shot through my hip, my ribs, my dignity. You're not leaving me, he said. You're not going to humiliate me. Not after everything I've done for you. He left me there on the stairs, gasping, and went to bed. I sat on the edge of a step for hours, counting my bruises, counting my options, realizing I had none. The morning after he dragged me from the stairs, the house was unbearably quiet. Light filtered through the sheer curtains, soft and golden, touching the bruises on my arm like an apology I didn't want. Adrian had left early, another meeting, another lie. I sat at the kitchen table staring at a cup of untouched coffee, listening to the clock tick. Every sound felt loud. The drip of the faucet, the hum of the refrigerator. Even my heartbeat felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. I should have left that morning. But trauma makes you small. It teaches you to wait for the next storm rather than run from it. When I finally opened the drawer for a spoon, I found a document tucked beneath the silverware. Bank statements, my name forged on every page. My salary, my savings, all drained into one account. His. The truth hit like cold water. This wasn't love. It was erasure. That evening, I walked into his office while he was on the phone. The room smelled like his cologne and whiskey, sharp and polished. He looked up with that easy charm, smiling for whoever was on the other line. I'll call you back, he said, setting the phone down. Why are you taking my money? I asked. My voice trembled, but I held his gaze, the first real defiance I'd shown in months. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers like a professor examining a slow student. Our money, Regina. Don't make everything sound so dramatic. I never agreed to. Sure. He rose slowly, walked around the desk, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. You're getting paranoid again. You know how you get when you're stressed. His tone was tender, soothing. The same tone he'd used to break me 100 times before. When I flinched away, his eyes hardened. You're lucky I still care enough to keep you out of jail. Those forged documents, I could turn you in. One word from me, and you're facing federal charges. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. That night, I packed a suitcase with everything I could carry and waited for him to fall asleep. I didn't make it far. The police stopped me 2 blocks from home. Apparently, there was a report of theft. Adrian's car was parked nearby, his hands folded behind his back like the picture of calm reason. She's confused, he told them, his voice low and persuasive. She's been struggling with her mental health for months. Sometimes she takes things that don't belong to her. They looked at me with pity. My throat closed around my words. I wanted to scream, wanted to tell them the truth, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Power always believes the louder voice, the more credible voice, the voice of the man in the expensive suit. When they left, he took my keys and my phone. Don't ever make me look like a fool again. He locked the bedroom that night. I slept in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths until morning, wondering if this was how it would end. Not with a bang, but with a slow erasure, until I was nothing but a ghost haunting my own life. It was then I realized I had to disappear before he erased me completely. I waited 3 weeks, played the obedient wife again. Soft smiles, measured laughter, no questions. I cleaned and cooked and acted the part while planning in silence. Then, one afternoon while he was in court, I slipped out. I carried only what would fit in a canvas tote, a journal filled with everything, my ID, a photo of my late mother, the bank statements I'd photographed on my phone. I left my wedding ring on the marble counter, beside his favorite pair of cufflinks, a message he'd understand. Outside, the air smelled like rain and exhaust and possibility. My heart hammered as I boarded the first train out of the city, watching the landscape blur, watching him disappear in the distance. For the first time in years, no one knew where I was. I rented a small room above a bookstore 2 towns away. The landlord was kind and quiet, asking no questions. The walls smelled faintly of old paper and dust and time. I spent my first night there sitting on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, whispering to myself like a prayer. You're free. You're free. You're alive. But freedom is strange. It feels like guilt at first. I started working at a cafe near the pier, pouring coffee for strangers who never ask questions. I liked it that way. My hands shook the first few weeks. The sound of a raised male voice made me flinch, made me look for exits. At night, I'd write everything down, the gaslighting, the bruises, the lies. Every cruel word he ever spoke. Every manipulation. Every subtle cruelty. I didn't know what for, only that I needed to remember, to reclaim the story before he rewrote it again. One afternoon, a customer left behind a newspaper. Adrian's face was on the front page. Star defense attorney expands firm, praised for charity work. My stomach turned. The world adored him. They called him a man of integrity, of character, of principle. I tore the page out and folded it carefully into my journal. That night, I wrote a single line. One day they'll know who he really is. And I meant it. It was at the cafe that I met Clara, the first person who really saw through my silence. She was older, probably in her 60s, with silver hair and eyes that had witnessed every human tragedy. She came in every Tuesday and Thursday, ordered black coffee, and sat by the window reading worn paperbacks. One evening as I closed my shift, she said, "You've got the look." "What look?" I asked, not looking up from wiping tables. The one women wear when they've been through hell and decided to come back swinging. I froze. She smiled gently and left a $20 bill under her cup. We became friends, slowly, cautiously. She never pushed, never pried, just left small notes on napkins. Quotes about survival, forgiveness, strength. Things like, "You are not broken, you are breaking free." One night, when the cafe was empty and the ocean was loud outside, I finally told her everything. From the first bruise, to the courtroom, humiliation, to the night on the stairs. I told her about Lila, about the deleted emails, about the forged bank statements. She listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her eyes steady and knowing. When I finished, she said, "If he framed you, you can unframe him. But you'll need proof, and patience, and a very clear head." That was the night the fire came back into my chest. For the first time in months, I didn't just want to survive. I wanted justice. I wanted the world to know who Adrian Ward really was. Clara became my anchor and my strategist. She taught me how to breathe again, how to think strategically instead of emotionally. "Revenge isn't rage," she said one night as we closed the cafe together. "It's precision. Let him hang himself with the rope he made for you." She helped me open a new email under a different name. Together, we began tracking Adrian's cases, his movements, his patterns. I spent nights scrolling through court records, piecing together a tapestry of manipulation. His clients' funds went missing, documents accidentally destroyed, witnesses suddenly recanted. Yet no one ever questioned him. Not Adrian Ward, the golden attorney, the man with the sympathetic voice and the troubled past. Then I found the file. Buried in an old online archive was a sealed court document. His second ex-wife had filed an abuse report. It was dismissed for lack of evidence, but the language was identical to my own accusations. Word for word. The same phrases, the same explanations, the same gaslighting patterns. He had recycled his defense script for years. He wasn't clever, just practiced. Clara helped me track down his other ex-wives through mutual connections. One by one, their stories matched. The same isolation, the same financial control, the same accusations of instability. He'd built an empire on their silence. That night, I whispered to the dark, "You built your empire on their silence. But I'm not one of them." Months passed. I kept my distance, letting him believe I'd vanished into nothing. But I was always watching, through his firm's newsletters, through whispers on legal forums, through the digital trail he left behind without even realizing. Then came the headline, Adrian Ward to receive Justice Foundation Award for Integrity and Law. Integrity. The word made my stomach twist. The ceremony would be televised nationally. Every major paper would cover it. Every news station would broadcast his acceptance speech. It was perfect. I began to plan. Clara connected me with Bennett Hayes, an old journalist friend who specialized in corruption exposés. He had a reputation for detailed, meticulous research. No sensationalism, just truth. I gave him the file, all of it. The financial transfers, the forged documents, the pattern of abuse across 5 marriages. My diary entries became evidence. The sealed court documents, the photographs of bruises, the records I'd kept in secret. He read everything in silence, his face growing darker. When he finished, he looked up and said, "This man's about to be very famous for all the wrong reasons." For the first time, I felt my fear turn into something sharper, something cleaner. Not hatred, power. The week before the ceremony, I walked past my reflection in a store window and barely recognized myself. My hair was shorter now, a better cut, more deliberate. My eyes were steadier, brighter. My shoulders were straighter. The woman staring back wasn't broken. She was deliberate. She was ready. I bought a simple black dress, not expensive, not showy. Just elegant, powerful without trying. Not for him. For me. For the woman I was reclaiming. When I returned to my rented room, the air smelled like rain and old paper. I sat at my desk, opened my journal, and wrote, "Tomorrow I stop being one of his ghosts. Tomorrow the world sees him as I do." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake listening to the city breathe, rehearsing the calm I'd need when I saw him again, preparing myself for the moment when everything would change. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers that cast fractured light across everything, making the world look like a broken mirror. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Society's elite, media moguls, judges and politicians and lawyers who'd helped him build his fortress of lies. Adrian stood on stage, his smile rehearsed to perfection, his suit cut by someone who understood power. Cameras flashed. The host called him a man of unwavering integrity and moral conviction. My pulse thundered in my ears. Bennett had sent the full dossier to every major outlet that morning. Emails scheduled perfectly, evidence time-stamped and verified, documentation airtight. All it needed was the right spark to draw the world's eyes. I waited in the back, watching, as Adrian stepped to the microphone. His face glowing with self-satisfaction, I walked in. Slowly, deliberately. The crowd turned like wheat in wind. He froze mid-sentence, his eyes locking on mine like he'd seen a ghost. "Regina!" he breathed, too softly for anyone else to hear. He was pale, his confidence cracking like thin ice. I smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, just smiled. "Go on," I said, my voice carrying across the stunned room. "Tell them about integrity." And then, as the first alert buzzed through the crowd's phones, notifications lighting up screens like falling stars, the room shifted. Gasps rippled like wind. On the projector behind him, headlines began flashing, one after another. Defense attorney Adrian Ward under investigation for fraud. Multiple women accuse Ward of domestic abuse and manipulation. Sealed documents reveal pattern of financial exploitation. How a good man destroyed 6 women's lives. He turned pale. The microphone crackled with his confusion. His hands trembled. I stood still, hands steady at my sides, watching the empire crumble in real time. Security came first, then the press. Cameras swarmed like vultures. Questions flew like weapons. Adrian stammered through denials, his perfect mask cracking, his voice breaking. I didn't move. I wanted him to see me, not as prey, but as proof that his lies had limits. "Mrs. Ward," a reporter called. "Did you supply the evidence?" I met her gaze, steady and clear. "No, the truth did." The words came out calm, almost detached. But inside I was shaking with release. Every bruise, every whispered insult, every sleepless night had led to this moment. Adrian's voice broke behind me. "You'll regret this, Regina." I turned, smiled faintly, and said, "You said that the night you spilled the wine." Then I walked away. The investigation went public within hours. Former clients came forward with their own stories of missing funds and destroyed evidence. Old cases reopened. Witnesses who'd been intimidated suddenly found their voices. His firm collapsed under the weight of his arrogance and years of accumulated crimes. By the end of the week, his license was suspended pending trial. By month's end, he was facing federal charges. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I sat by the pier that evening, watching gulls sweep across the gray water in elegant arcs, and cried, not from victory, but from the weight lifting off my chest, from finally being able to breathe without counting the cost. Clara joined me, handing me a cup of tea. "How does it feel?" "Like exhaling for the first time in years," I said. She nodded wisely. "He doesn't get to define you anymore. That's the real win." The sunset burned gold against the waves. I let the sound of it settle inside me, soft and endless and mine. Bennett's article won a Pulitzer Prize. Adrian's name became a cautionary tale in law schools and domestic violence awareness campaigns. His mugshot appeared in every major publication. The phrase in Adrian Ward became code for a charming predator. But I didn't follow the trial closely. I had other things to do. I moved to a new city, a quiet town by the coast where no one knew my history. I rented a small apartment with a balcony overlooking the ocean. I went back to editing, but now I edited stories about strength, about women who refused to stay broken, about survival and reclamation. Sometimes I still dream of the courtroom, of his smirk, of the night I left my ring on the counter. But in those dreams now I walk away. Every time. I planted a small garden on my balcony, lavender, basil, white roses, jasmine that fills the evening with its gentle perfume. I read every morning with sunlight on my knees and coffee in my hands. I write letters to the other women, Adrian's first 5, though I never send them. I just want them to know you are not crazy. You are not unstable. You are not the problem. Some scars don't fade, but they stop hurting when you own them. I attended a domestic violence survivors conference last month and met 2 of his ex-wives. We didn't need to speak much. We just held hands in a circle and understood. Isabella, his 5th wife, is writing a book about her experience. She dedicated it to me. I cried when she told me. Last week, I received a letter from Lila. She'd found safety. She'd found her voice. She told me that watching me stand up to him in that ballroom had been the catalyst for her own healing. I saved that letter. I read it on hard days. I am Regina Ward. I was his sixth wife. I survived his charm, his manipulation, his calculated cruelty. I survived the gaslighting, the isolation, the slow erasure of myself. I survived the bruises, the lies, the accusations that I was unstable when I was simply trying to hold onto reality. I survived him. And I swear, with every fiber of my being, with every scar that marks my body and soul, I was his last. The other women survived too. We found each other in the aftermath. We built a community from our collective pain. We spoke our truths, and the world finally listened. Adrian Ward is in federal prison, serving consecutive sentences for fraud, evidence tampering, and financial exploitation. He appealed 3 times. He lost every appeal. But that's not the victory. The victory is that I'm alive, that I'm whole, that I'm not defined by what he did to me. I'm defined by what I did next. The victory is that I stood up in that ballroom, looked him in the eye, and said his name, his crimes, his truth to the world. The victory is that I got my life back. And every woman who's watching the story, who's identifying with Regina, who's seeing herself in these pages, you can do it too. You can escape. You can heal. You can become more than what was done to you. You are stronger than you think. Your voice matters. Your truth is real, and you will never be alone again. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, forwarded through my publisher. It was handwritten, the script shaky but determined. Inside was a single photograph, a woman's face, bruised, barely recognizable. Behind the photo, a note. Regina, I'm Adrian's daughter from his first marriage. I never knew what he really was until I saw your story. My mother wouldn't talk about him. She just said he was complicated. Now I understand. She was protecting me from the truth, but also protecting his lie. Thank you for breaking his silence. Thank you for showing me that powerful men can fall. I'm going to therapy now. I'm going to heal. I wanted you to know that you didn't just save yourself. You saved me too. Michael. I held that letter for a long time, crying. The letters kept coming. Hundreds of them. Women from across the country sharing their own stories of men like Adrian. Men with charming smiles and brutal hands. Women who'd been isolated, gaslit, framed. Women who thought they were alone. One letter was from a prosecutor who'd reopened 3 of Adrian's old cases where his defense work had been built on lies. Innocent people were being released from prison. He'd destroyed more lives than anyone realized. Another was from a law school dean, thanking me for inspiring a new curriculum on recognizing predatory behavior in the legal profession. But the letter that broke me came from Isabella, Adrian's 5th wife. Dear Regina, I wanted to tell you that I'm no longer ashamed. For 15 years, I carried the shame of what he did to me. I thought I was weak for staying. I thought I was foolish for believing his lies. But watching you stand up to him, watching you reclaim your narrative, it gave me permission to do the same. I'm publishing my memoir next year. The working title is His 5th Wife, How I Reclaimed My Name. And I want you to know that you inspired that. You gave me back my voice. I love you like a sister. Isabella, I framed that one. 6 months into his federal trial, I was called to testify. I'd prepared for this moment with Bennett and a trauma-informed lawyer named Dr. Sarachin. We'd practiced, discussed strategy, worked through my anxiety. But nothing could truly prepare me for seeing Adrian again across a courtroom. He looked diminished, smaller. His hair had gone gray at the temples. His expensive tailoring couldn't hide the weight he'd lost. When our eyes met, I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no sadness. Just a clinical recognition that this was a man who'd hurt me, and he was no longer a threat. The prosecutor asked me to describe the abuse. I did calmly and clearly. Every detail, every manipulation, every bruise. Adrian's defense attorney tried to discredit me, tried to paint me as unstable, vengeful, unreliable. It was the same playbook Adrian had written, but this time I had documentation. I had the other women's testimonies. I had Bennett's investigative journalism. I had truth. When the prosecutor asked me if I felt any sympathy for Adrian Ward, I paused. And I was honest. I feel sad for the man he could have been if he hadn't chosen cruelty. I feel sad for every woman he hurt. And I feel grateful that he underestimated me, that he believed I was too broken to fight back, because I am very much not broken. The courtroom was silent. Adrian's jaw tightened. For the first time, he looked afraid. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They came back with a guilty verdict on all counts. He was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole until he'd served at least 12. As he was led away, he looked back at me. I simply nodded. It was over. 3 months after the verdict, Clara suggested I start a support group. There are so many women who need what you have, she said. Your story, your strength, your proof that survival is possible. I was hesitant. I wasn't a therapist. I wasn't trained. But Clara was right. So I found a small community center near the pier, reserved a room on Wednesday evenings, and put out a simple announcement. Support group for survivors of intimate partner abuse. No judgment, no pressure, just women sharing their truth. 12 women showed up the first week. By the third week, there were 30. I didn't lead with my story. Instead, I sat in a circle and listened. I listened to women describe the exact same manipulation tactics Adrian had used. I listened to their shame, their confusion, their slow understanding that they hadn't been crazy. One woman, a federal judge named Margaret, said something that changed everything. I had access to the law, and I still couldn't see what was happening to me. That's how insidious this is. He was a legal expert. He weaponized the system against me. Another woman, a therapist named Dr. Yolanda, added, "We need to retrain ourselves to recognize the red flags, the subtle ones, the ones that look like love." And I realized this was bigger than Adrian Ward. This was about how we raise men, how we condition women to accept control as love, how we've normalized manipulation in the name of romance. Then let's teach it, I said. Let's create resources. Let's train people, especially young people, to recognize these patterns before they become traps. That's when the Regina Ward Foundation was born. Within a year, the foundation had grown beyond my wildest imagination. We started with a hotline, women calling at 2 a.m., trembling, asking, "Is this normal? Is this abuse? Am I crazy?" We had trained counselors ready with the answer, "No, you're not crazy, and you're not alone." We created educational materials for high schools, universities, and workplaces. We trained organizations to recognize predatory patterns. We funded legal services for women fighting abusers in court. Isabella joined the board. So did Margaret, the federal judge. And Dr. Yolanda became our head of clinical operations. Bennett wrote a follow-up article about the foundation's work, and it went viral. Donations poured in. Within 18 months, we'd opened satellite offices in 15 cities. But the crown jewel of our work was the Reclamation Program, a comprehensive recovery program for survivors of psychological abuse. It combined therapy, legal support, financial planning, and community. Women came for 6 months, stayed in a safe house, rebuilt their lives. The success rate was remarkable. Of the 200 women who'd gone through the program, 97% reported feeling confident, stable, and independent by graduation. One evening, I sat in my office looking at photographs of these women, their faces bright with recovery, their eyes clear with hope, and I thought about Adrian in his cell. He'd intended to destroy me. Instead, he'd inadvertently created a force for healing. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a year and a half after Adrian's conviction. I was at the foundation's main office, reviewing case files, when Clara appeared at my door, her expression unreadable. "You have a visitor," she said carefully. "She says it's important. But I wanted to ask you first if you were willing." My stomach tightened. Who? Adrian's first wife. Margaret, not the judge. The original Margaret. She never gave a statement during the trial. She says she wants to meet you. I almost said no, but something in me, the part that had learned to trust my instincts, said yes. Margaret was smaller than I expected, maybe 70 years old, with kind eyes and silver hair in a neat bun. She looked nervous. I needed to meet you in person, she said, sitting across from me. I needed to say thank you. You see, I've spent 35 years thinking I was crazy. 35 years convinced that I'd misunderstood Adrian, that maybe he was right and I was wrong. She pulled out an old newspaper clipping, their wedding announcement. She'd kept it all these years. When I saw your story, when I heard you describe exactly what he did to me, with the same words he used, the same explanations, I finally understood. It wasn't me. It was never me. He's a systematic predator. I'm 60 years into my life, and finally, I'm allowed to be angry. We sat together in silence for a long time. Then Margaret said something that became the motto of our foundation. The greatest gift we can give survivors is the permission to be furious. By the time she left, we were both crying, but they were healing tears. Bennett approached me with a proposal. A full book, my entire story, published by one of the largest houses in the country. Your story needs to be preserved, he said. It needs to reach people globally. It needs to be a resource and a roadmap for anyone who's trapped. I was reluctant. My life wasn't a performance piece. But then I thought about the letters, about the women who said my story saved them, about Isabella's book, which had reached number 3 on the bestseller list. I said yes. The book took 18 months to write. It was harder than I expected, reliving every moment, putting names and faces to pain. But Dr. Yolanda was there through it, helping me process the trauma as it surfaced. The book was titled simply, His Sixth Wife, How I Escaped a Predator and Became Myself Again. The publisher wanted a publication date for maximum buzz. I suggested the anniversary of the day Adrian was arrested, not to glorify the revenge, but to honor the moment freedom became possible. On publication day, I did something I'd never done before. I gave a reading at a sold-out auditorium. 2,000 people, mostly women, sat in absolute silence as I read passages from my own pain. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted 8 minutes. After the reading, hundreds of women lined up to share their stories with me. Girls barely 18, women in their 80s, every demographic, every background. They all had the same message. Thank you for showing me I could survive. 2 years after Adrian's conviction, I received a letter forwarded from the prison system. Adrian had written to me. Clara suggested I not read it, but I needed to. I needed to see what he had to say, to look at his words and know that they had no power over me. I opened it carefully. Regina, I've had a lot of time to think in here. I've read your book. I understand now that you've turned your experience into a crusade. I want you to know that I don't regret my actions. You were mine to control. That's what love is, dominance. But I underestimated you. I believed the stories I told about you, that you were fragile, unstable, helpless. I was wrong. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. If I'm honest, that's why I married you 6th. The other wives had already learned to question me. You still had faith in goodness. That was your weakness, and I exploited it. I don't apologize for what I did, but I acknowledge that you won. You escaped and built something from it. That's remarkable. I respect power, and you have it now. Signed, Adrian. I read it once. Then I burned it. His letter changed nothing. It was just another manipulation, trying to reframe his abuse as some twisted form of respect, trying to regain power over the narrative, even from behind bars. But I realized something. Adrian's opinion of me no longer mattered. My opinion of myself did. The foundation now operates in 42 cities across 6 countries. We've helped over 10,000 women escape abusive situations. We've trained 15,000 professionals in recognizing predatory behavior. We've funded legal cases that have put 43 abusers behind bars. Isabella's memoir is being adapted into a streaming series. Bennett's book about the investigation won multiple awards. Dr. Yolanda's research on the psychology of intimate partner abuse is now taught in universities worldwide. And me? I'm still editing. I'm still gardening. I'm still reading by the window with sunlight on my knees. But now I do it knowing that every choice I make is my own. Every decision comes from my own wisdom, not from fear. Every day is lived fully, consciously, deliberately. I'm engaged to someone, a therapist named Marcus who respects my autonomy and celebrates my power. We met at a foundation fundraiser. He knew my story before he knew my face. When we finally met, he said, "I'm honored to stand next to someone so brave. I'm marrying him in the spring, not because I need him to complete me, but because I choose him to walk with me." 5 years into his sentence, Adrian requested a meeting with me, facilitated through the prison system. I was terrified, but my therapist, Dr. Yolanda, encouraged me to go if I wanted to. "Only if it will help you," she said. "Not for him. For you." I decided to go. Adrian sat across from me in the prison visitation room, separated by a plexiglass barrier. He'd aged dramatically, his hair completely gray, his face lined with years he couldn't escape. He looked diminished, defeated, ordinary. "Thank you for coming," he said. I said nothing. I was here to listen, not to engage. "I've been in therapy," he continued. "Court-ordered, but I've actually engaged with it. And I'm beginning to understand the scope of what I did. Not just to you, but to all of them. I created a template for destruction. I perfected the art of breaking women." He paused, his hands flat on the table between us. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know what I am. I'm a predator. I chose to prey on women who had good hearts and believed in redemption. That makes me worse, not better." I studied his face, looking for manipulation, for performance. But he actually looked broken, actually looked at peace with being broken. "Why did you ask me here?" I asked quietly. "Because you're the only one who didn't break," he said. "You survived. You thrived. And I need to know how. How did you do it?" I need to know how. How did you do it? And I realized he was asking because he couldn't do it himself. Adrian Ward, the master manipulator, the predatory genius, was fundamentally empty. He had no internal compass. He'd built his entire identity on control over others. "I found myself," I said simply. "I had to remember who I was before you. And then I had to grieve who I thought you were. And then I had to choose who I wanted to become next." He nodded slowly. "I think about that a lot," he said. "I have no sense of self outside of domination. Without someone to control, I'm nothing." "Then maybe," I said, standing to leave, "you should finally learn to be something." I didn't visit again, but I heard through the grapevine that Adrian had changed his will. He was donating his entire estate to the Regina Ward Foundation. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps it was genuine change. Either way, his money now goes toward helping the women he hurt. Some people said I should feel vindicated. Instead, I felt sad. Sad that it took him reaching absolute bottom to begin any kind of healing. Today, I'm 45 years old. I've been free from Adrian for 13 years. I've been running the foundation for 12. I no longer think of myself as his 6th wife. That's a title I've relinquished, like a piece of clothing that no longer fits. Now I think of myself as a woman who loved the wrong person and lived to tell about it. As a woman who lost herself and found herself again. As a woman who turned pain into purpose. The lavender on my balcony blooms every spring. The jasmine fills my evening air with its perfume. And I read every morning with sunlight on my knees, feeling grateful for every single day of this second life I've built. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd never left Adrian's house. If I'd stayed and let him erase me completely. If I'd let fear win. But I didn't. Instead, I became a lighthouse for other women in darkness. I became proof that survival is possible, that recovery is possible, that you can take the worst thing that happened to you and transform it into medicine for others. I am Regina Ward. I was his sixth wife, and I am so much more than that. To anyone listening, if you're in a relationship where you're losing yourself, where your voice is getting smaller, where your joy is disappearing, where you're starting to doubt your own reality, please listen to me. That's not love. That's predation dressed up as devotion. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are not unlovable. You are being systematically dismantled by someone who is threatened by your strength. The path to freedom is terrifying. It's harder than staying. It's lonelier than staying. But on the other side of that fear is a life that's entirely, completely, authentically yours. There are people ready to help. There are resources available. There are thousands of us who have walked this path and lived to reclaim ourselves. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have a plan. You just have to be willing to choose yourself. And if you do, I promise you, you will become more than you ever thought possible. Every predator operates from the same playbook. Isolation, gaslighting, financial control, intermittent reinforcement of love and cruelty, the creation of a false narrative where they're the hero and you're the problem. The pattern is predictable. The outcome is avoidable, but only if you're willing to trust yourself more than you trust their version of you. This story is inspired by the testimonies of thousands of survivors. The names are changed, but the patterns are real. The manipulation tactics are real. Your story matters too. The recovery is real. And the victory of standing up and saying no more, that is the most real thing of all. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, please reach out. National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233 crisis text line. Text home to 741-741 International Women's Resource Center. Resources available in 150+ languages. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you deserve to be free. If you've made it this far in my story, you understand. Respect is non-negotiable. Your worth isn't defined by anyone else's seating chart. Not by who gets the credit. Not by who your family believes first. My story proves that silence can be a weapon and patience can be power. I waited. I documented. I survived. My story is about recognizing manipulation, finding your voice, and taking back your power. Adrian Ward had perfected his predatory pattern across 5 marriages, but I became his last wife and his undoing. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who's been gaslit into invisibility. Tell them, your silence doesn't make you weak. Your boundaries don't make you difficult. Your survival makes you extraordinary. Because the revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories about setting boundaries, finding your worth, and turning humiliation into triumph. Your worth was never in question. It was only ever waiting to be remembered. I remembered mine. Now it's your turn to remember yours. We are stronger together. My story was written to illuminate the reality of intimate partner abuse and to honor the courage of survivors everywhere. May it serve as both warning and inspiration. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, reach out today. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You deserve to be free.